Hello Pokemon fans, I'm Real Mama Eagle, also known as Key, and today we're here to talk about the most frustrating things about every single Pokemon generation. This video is by no means to debase the Pokemon name. I adore Pokemon, have since 1996, own every generation and every version. This is just to have a constructive conversation about things that would have been maybe a bit less frustrating on our playthroughs of every single game. Before we get started, leave a like down below, comment, and subscribe. That would be appreciated, and let's get started. Generation 1. Now, Generation 1 is probably the hardest to vent any frustrations about because Gen 1 has a lot of loyalists and cultists. I'm sorry, but it's true. But there are definitely a lot of things that made Gen 1 very, very frustrating. For example, the movesets. They made absolutely no sense. You had bug Pokemon, the one type in Generation 1 that could take out Psychic, but you had no great bug moves. The only good bug move, arguably good, was Twin Needle, and only Beedrill could learn it. What the heck? You of course had Pin Missile, but it had an incredibly low base power. You have a great bug Pokemon like Pinsir, and he can't learn a single bug move. Let's also talk about the fact that there's only one Dragon evolution line, but no Dragon move. Dragon Rage doesn't count. There's only one Ghost evolution line with one Ghost move. Well, technically Nightshade doesn't really count. You did face gym leaders late in the game who had Pokemon that were higher level, but they still had lower level evolution moves. Giovanni's gym at the end of the game, he has a Nidoqueen that has Scratch. What the heck? The other frustrating thing about Gen 1 is you can argue that it really doesn't have much of a story or direction. People may argue with me and say Lavender Town. That's one of the few exceptions, and Sylph Company is totally optional. Outside of gyms, there's not a lot to be left desired, and outside of Fuchsia City and Celadon City, there's not really a ton to do in Kanto, so those are things that could frustrate someone who's looking for a bit more of a story-rich experience. Generation 2. Now, this is gonna hurt because Gen 2 is a fan favorite, but I do apologize because Gen 2 does have a lot of flaws, more than people are willing to acknowledge. Gen 2 suffers from a great region, but they don't capitalize it on enough. You have the lore of the 10 Tower, Ecruteak City, War Island, Slowpoke Well, and the main story is Team Rocket either disbanding and or taking over the radio tower. They could have done so much more story-wise. Gen 2 also suffers from the fact that it pretty much rides Kanto's coattails and needs Kanto to be relevant for multiple reasons. For example, the Johto gym leaders, they mostly have Kanto Pokemon. There's no reason Falconer should not have had a Noctowl or a Hoot Hoot. There's no reason Chuck shouldn't have had a Hitmontop. No reason that Morty shouldn't have had a Misdreavus, but instead they load them all with Kanto Pokemon. Not to mention, I always felt kind of forced to choose the Fire Starter in Gen 2 because they don't really give you a ton of new Pokemon. And in general, the Dex is actually very overrated. You don't really get a lot of new Pokemon. There's just some random Gen 1 evolutions and baby Pokemon that no one asked for, but not a lot of creativity. The best Pokemon, Larvitar, Sneasel, a lot of them are locked at Mount Silver in the post-game where you actually can't reach them until after you beat the Elite Four. Some after you get the Kanto Gem Badge. And let's talk about Kanto in Gen 2 because everybody talks about the fact that you can go back to Kanto, which is great, but Kanto is a shell in Gen 2. The game corner's gone. The Safari Zone's gone. Lavender Town's wholesome and there's no more lore. Everything that made Kanto great is gone. Cinnabar Island's burned down. Viridian Forest is literally just a path. So everyone talks so much about Gen 2 having that experience with going back to Kanto, but they kind of took Kanto away. Y'all, it's pretty much gone. And I know that hurts a lot of people to say, but Gen 2 definitely missed the mark on a lot of things, but I think that's because they thought it was going to be the last generation. Who knows? Gen 3 had way too much water. I'm kidding. The water's fine. Diving is great in Gen 3. Don't at me. Gen 3 to me is actually the least flawed generation in all 8 generations. The only things I'd really say about Generation 3 is the fact that it kind of felt like Team Aqua and Magma were doing the same thing. One was expanding the land, one was expanding the sea. Where I love the idea of 2 criminal teams, they definitely could have expanded on it just a bit more. Maybe had their goals be a bit more broad because it kind of felt like they were doing the same thing. Other than that, I got nothing. Generation 4 is another fan favorite generation, but like Gen 3, Gen 4 has a little bit of flaws. There's one thing in particular for me that makes the game very frustrating, and that's the Pokedex. A lot of people would say that Pokemon Platinum fixed the Pokedex issues in Gen 4, but I still think that even in Platinum, the Pokedex suffers from some major flaws. It's very hard to find a fire Pokemon. You're almost forced to use Infernape almost every playthrough because your options are really Ponyta and not much else. One thing about the Pokedex that I also wasn't too much of a fan is that it also felt dependent on Generation 1 and Generation 2. They pandered a lot because a lot of the back end of the Pokedex was just them giving us a bunch of evolutions that we didn't ask for. Now, some of them are cool. Togekiss is awesome. Weavile is amazing. Mamoswine is incredible. And then we get Licky Licky and Tangrowth. Who asked for those? Gen 4 simply suffers from the fact that they did not create enough original Pokemon in their Pokedex, which makes putting a team together when you play through Pokemon very hard. And sometimes some of the items you need to get set evolutions or areas you need or late in the game where it's very hard, so you have to go through most of your playthrough with a pretty much an unevolved Pokemon. Other than that, Gen 4 is great, not as frustrating. Generation 5. Now this one hurts me a little bit because Gen 5 is actually my personal favorite, but there are flaws that would make the game very, very frustrating. For example, the starters. One would argue the starters are the worst group in the entire Pokemon series. Now, I personally love Samurott and Serperior, but Emboar is an example of yet another fire and fighting starter that we didn't ask for. Design-wise, all three probably are on the weaker side, same with learned sets, but it is pretty much a pretty poor group in the series. Another reason that Gen 5 can be frustrating, what's with the unnecessary high evolution levels? Some of my favorite Pokemon, Hydreigon, Volcarona, have absolutely absurd evolution levels. Half of the time, you may even get through the Elite Four before you even evolve your Pokemon to that certain level. Another thing that can be criticized for Gen 5 that can make it frustrating, even though you get a whole new dex, which I adore, sometimes some Pokemon in the dex could seem like they're carbon copies of other Pokemon. I love Garbodor personally, unpopular opinion, I know, but Garbodor could be compared to Muk. Amoonguss could be compared to Voltorb and Electroid just for the simple fact that they look like a Pokeball. Those are some things that could be lacking, the fact that they may have took too many ideas from Gen 1's Pokedex because it was a soft reboot. Generation 6. Generation 6 definitely has a few things that can make a playthrough frustrating. For starters, for a story-based player like me, I kind of felt like the story in Gen 6 was a bit lacking. Gen 6 story mainly was based around Team Flare, Lysandre, that part I loved, and Mega Evolution. The story was about Mega Evolution, but then when it was time to Mega Evolve, you could only have a Lucario or a Gen 1 starter. And don't get me wrong, Gen 1 starters are great, Lucario is great, but I would have loved to Mega Evolve other random Pokemon in the Gen 6 decks or my Gen 6 starter, you know? By any chance? That would have been nice. But you couldn't Mega Evolve many things until the Gen 3 remakes, go figure. Also, I would definitely say when it comes to Gen 6, Kalos region as a whole is pretty unforgettable. Outside of Lumoy City, do you even remember most of the cities? Maybe Anastar City, but I think that's kind of it. The post-game is also pretty forgettable too, and it kind of mimics Gen 1. Okay, great, you beat the Elite Four. Now go catch Mewtwo. Also, the gym leaders in the Elite Four and Gen 6, total pushovers. That was frustrating to me as someone who likes a challenge. All the Elite Four members only had 4 Pokemon. A lot of the gym leaders had 4 Pokemon or less. Wolfric, the final gym leader, your 8th badge. A total pushover. What the heck? Generation 7. Now, Generation 7 was fun, but there are definitely things that would frustrate any Pokemon player. For example, the excess dialogue. Yes, Pokemon's an RPG. Yes, RPGs are known for dialogue, but Lily, Hop, the Professor, your auntie stop you every 5 minutes. You want to go this way, they stop you. You want to catch Pokemon, they stop you. You want to battle, they stop you. It can be incredibly frustrating, the excessive dialogue and the constant stopping when you just want to go on your adventure and have a good time. Secondly, the trials in Gen 7 are way too easy. I would have loved to see maybe a bit more buff with the totem Pokemon, maybe leveled a bit higher, but I really felt like it was just a normal Pokemon battle when battling them. Would have loved to see that as well. I also hate the fact that you kind of had to have the experience share forced on. For someone like me who likes to grind, it's definitely something that I felt was taken away from my experience in the difficulty level. That's pretty much it for Gen 7. Generation 8. Generation 8 is a great generation, but there are definitely things about it that would be frustrating. For example, the champion in the end tournament. Leon to me was a total pushover and probably the easiest champion since Dianthia in Gen 6. I also didn't like the fact that you kind of like battled a lot of the same trainers over in the final tournament. You pretty much knew what to expect, so there really wasn't a big element of surprise. I would have loved to see 4 or 5 totally new people and getting completely thrown for a loop and having a different experience with that. I would also say the region of Galar, while very beautiful, a lot of the towns did not feel open enough to me. Now, I felt like they focused so much on the wild area that they didn't really focus on expanding the towns, making them feel explorable, making them feel open. You see so many towns and you see so much space you can't get to, and that's it. It kind of feels like you could explore so much further. I would also say the story in Sword and Shield leaves a lot to be desired. It does ramp up at the end of the game and the DLC does save it, but I feel like the first half is bogged down by you and Sonia kind of talking about the Sword and Shield mystery, but it kind of like just is blah to me. But that's it. Do you agree or disagree with me about the things that may have been more frustrating in the Pokemon generations? Or do you have things that I may have overlooked? Let me know. Talk to me in the comments section down below. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you want to talk about as far as Pokemon next. I'm Real Mom Eagle.